I never believed in Santa Claus. Not really. My parents were practical people, the kind who labeled the boxes in the garage and kept receipts folded in envelopes. When I was 6, my dad accidentally left a price tag on a toy fire truck, and that was the end of it. No magic, no mystery, just adults doing things behind closed doors and lying to make life easier. That's probably why it took me so long to understand what was happening the winter I worked nights for the U.S. Postal Service in northern Wisconsin. I was 34, divorced, and trying to outrun debt. Seasonal overtime paid well, especially overnight sorting shifts. The distribution center sat on the edge of town, a concrete block surrounded by pine trees and snowdrifts tall as cars. December nights there were quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the world had been muted. The first strange thing happened on December 6th. I was sorting packages alone in Zone C, scanning barcodes and tossing boxes onto the appropriate belts. Around 2:17 a.m., a package came through with no return address. That wasn't unusual by itself, but the label was handwritten in red ink, block letters pressed so hard they dented the cardboard. To Michael Harris from Santa Claus. I laughed out loud. Grown adults send dumb joke packages all the time. Still, procedure said undeliverable sender information should be flagged. I picked it up to set it aside. The box was warm. Not slightly warm from the conveyor belt motor, warm like something alive had been sitting in the cold and was just brought indoors. I dropped it instinctively. It hit the concrete with a soft thud, not the hollow sound of toys or clothes. I stared at it for a long moment before crouching down and touching it again. Warm, definitely warm. I scanned it. The system accepted it without issue and flashed green. No error, no alert. According to the screen, it had entered the system normally at a regional hub 2 states away. No notes, no flags. Against my better judgment, I put it back on the belt. That night, I dreamed I was 6 years old again, sitting at the top of the stairs in my parents' house, watching the living room through the banister rails. The Christmas tree lights were on, blinking softly. I heard footsteps on the roof. Slow. Heavy. Something came down the chimney, but it wasn't a man. It bent wrong, and joints popping as it unfolded itself onto the carpet. I remember trying to scream and realizing I couldn't make a sound. I woke up gasping, my throat raw. Over the next week, more packages appeared, always handwritten, always red ink, always warm. Some were addressed to children, some to adults, a few to entire families. None had a real return address, just Santa Claus, sometimes with a little smiley face or a shaky attempt at holly drawn beside it. I started setting them aside, uneasy. But every time I did, my supervisor would come by later and move them back into circulation without comment. "Those need to go out," she told me once, her voice flat. "They don't have proper sender info," I said. She looked at me like I was slow. "They're cleared. Don't worry about it." I worried anyway. The news broke on December 14th. A family in a nearby town, mother, father, 2 kids, had been found dead in their home. Christmas morning came early for them, the anchor said grimly. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints. The bodies were arranged neatly in the living room, sitting upright on the couch and chairs, eyes open, mouths stretched into something that might have been smiles. Under the tree were presents, wrapped in brown paper, handwritten tags. I didn't go to work that night. I told myself I was sick. But really, I was sitting in my dark apartment, lights off, staring at the snow piling up against my window. On December 16th, I got a package. It was on my kitchen table when I came home from the grocery store, sitting neatly between the salt shaker and the coffee maker. I hadn't heard a knock. The door wasn't forced. The deadbolt was still locked. The tag read, "To Michael from Santa." My hands shook as I touched it, warm. Inside was a small cardboard box. Inside that was a cassette tape. I don't own a cassette player, but my car does. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, breath fogging the windshield, and slid the tape in. Static. Then breathing. Then a voice, low and hoarse, like it hadn't been used in a long time. "You were good this year," it said. There was a pause. I could hear something crackling, like fire. "You stopped believing," the voice continued. "That wasn't your fault. But you still knew right from wrong. You still knew when to look away." My mouth was dry. "I watch everyone," the voice said. "I always have. I know who locks their doors and who leaves them open. I know who lies to their children and who hurts them when no one is looking. I know who deserves coal." The tape clicked off. I sat there for a long time before driving back to the post office. Zone C was empty when I arrived. Too empty. The belts were running, but there were no packages, no workers, just the hum of machinery and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. At the far end of the room, near the loading bays, I saw something red. A man stood there with his back to me, tall, broad, dressed in a Santa suit that looked nothing like the cheap mall costumes I'd seen growing up. The fabric was thick and dark, the fur trim yellowed and matted. The boots were black leather, cracked and stained. He was holding a sack. It twitched. I should have run. Instead, I took a step forward. "Hey," I called. My voice echoed too loudly. He turned slowly. His beard was real, long, tangled. His skin was pale, almost blue, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were bright and glassy, like frozen lakes. "You work hard," he said. His voice was the same as on the tape. "That matters." "What is this?" I asked. "What are you doing?" He smiled, and the smell hit me, cold air and smoke and something rotten underneath. "Delivering," he said. He stepped closer, and I saw the sack more clearly. It wasn't burlap. It was stitched together from different fabrics, clothes maybe, sleeves, pant legs, bits of Christmas sweaters. Something inside it made a muffled sound. "I don't want any part of this," I said. "You already have a part," he replied. "You move the packages. You make sure they get where they're going. You noticed me, and you didn't stop me." "I didn't know," I said. He tilted his head. "You knew enough." He reached into the sack and pulled something out. A lump of blackened coal. He pressed it into my hands. It was hot enough to burn, but I didn't drop it. "For looking away," he said softly. The lights went out. When they came back on, I was alone. The coal was gone. My hands were blistered. The next morning, the news reported another family dead. Another town. Same details. I tried to go to the police. I told them about the packages, the tape, the man. They listened politely, exchanged looks, and asked if I'd been under a lot of stress lately. That night, the frost came inside my apartment. It crept along the walls like veins, spreading no matter how high I turned the heat. I dreamed again. This time, I was the one in the red suit. I was the one moving through houses without opening doors, standing over beds, weighing souls like gifts in my hands. I felt ancient and exhausted and righteous all at once. I woke with blood under my fingernails. On December 23rd, I found my name on the sorting list. Not as a recipient, as a sender. Hundreds of packages were logged under my employee ID, all marked cleared and delivered. All handwritten labels, all red ink. I quit that morning. Walked out without telling anyone. Christmas Eve, the bells started ringing outside my apartment. Not jingle bells, deep, heavy bells that shook the glass. He came through the wall, not the door. Brick and plaster bent around him like they were made of wax. "You don't get to quit," he said. "I won't help you," I said. "You already have," he replied, "but you can do more." He told me the truth then, or something close to it. There was never one Santa. There was a role, a burden, something old that needed hands and eyes and judgment. People stopped believing, but belief was never the point. Participation was. Postal workers, mall Santas, parents, anyone who helped move the gifts, who kept the lie alive, who ignored the cracks. The bad had learned to hide, to smile, to wrap themselves in normalcy. He punished them because someone had to. And the families? I asked. The children? They were already broken, he said. I just finished it. I screamed at him. I begged. I told him he was wrong. He listened patiently. When he left, the suit was hanging in my closet. I didn't put it on. Not that year. I left town, changed my name, tried to disappear. But every December, packages show up where I work. Handwritten, warm, cleared by systems that shouldn't allow them. Every year, the news reports the same stories, and every year, the suit comes back. This year, it's closer than ever. I can feel it when I sleep, pressing against my thoughts, reminding me how easy it would be to stop running. If you're reading this and you still believe Santa's just a story, hold on to that. Lock your doors. Watch the people you trust, because Santa Claus is real, and he's still watching. Story the end. I used to work loss prevention for a regional retail chain in Ohio, the kind of job where you watch people more than products and learn quickly how thin the line is between normal and desperate. December was always the worst. People stole toys with shaking hands, food with their heads down, and sometimes things that made no sense at all. Santa suits disappeared every year. Beards, boots, bells. We joked about it. Management blamed drunk college kids or seasonal pranksters. The year I'm talking about, the thefts didn't stop after Christmas. January 3rd, inventory flagged another missing suit from the back stockroom of our Dayton store. Full set. Coat, pants, belt, hat, beard, gloves. It was the fourth one since Thanksgiving. I pulled footage. The cameras caught nothing unusual. No break-ins, no alarms, no after-hours movement. The suit was simply gone between closing and opening as if it had never been there. I filed the report, annoyed more than concerned. Then the calls started. First was a woman from Riverside, raw and hoarse, asking if we'd rented Santa suits for private events. She said a man dressed as Santa had come to her house late Christmas night after midnight. He'd knocked once. Hard. When she opened the door, he was standing there holding a sack. I didn't invite him, she kept saying. I swear I didn't. She thought it was a joke, maybe a neighbor. She said he smelled like smoke and cold air, like he'd been outside for hours. He told her he was behind schedule. He asked if the children were asleep. She shut the door in his face. When her husband checked the porch, there were no footprints. Snow had been falling all night. The next call came from the police department in a nearby township. A patrol officer wanted to know if our stores used real bells on Santa suits. Heavy ones. Because we found one, he said, at a scene. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. By the second week of January, 3 children were missing. Different neighborhoods, different towns, no forced entry, no signs of struggle, just parents who swore they'd locked their doors and checked on their kids before bed. Witnesses mentioned Santa, always Santa. The news avoided the word at first. A man in costume, a person of interest, wearing red. Eventually, they stopped saying anything at all. The stories fell off the front page, replaced by weather and sports and the usual January quiet. I couldn't let it go. I grew up Catholic, altar boy until I was 13. Christmas had been sacred in my house. Midnight mass, candles, nativity scenes my mother arranged with obsessive care. Santa was a separate thing, a friendly lie layered over something holy. Even as an adult, I'd never felt afraid of the idea of him. Uneasy, maybe, in the way you are, about all lies told to children, but never afraid. That changed when I started comparing notes. I pulled old police reports, missing persons cases around Christmas going back decades. Patterns emerged if you looked hard enough. Rural towns, small cities near forests or old industrial land. Dates clustering around Christmas Eve and Christmas night, but also the days after, when the story was supposed to be over. In 1987, a boy vanished in West Virginia, last seen asleep in his bed. The only unusual detail in the report was a neighbor who claimed to hear sleigh bells at 2 a.m. In 1962, a family in northern Michigan reported a break-in on December 26th. Nothing stolen. Their youngest child missing. The father told police he'd found a lump of coal on the kitchen table, still warm. Older cases got stranger. Before DNA. Before reliable records. Mentions of the Christmas man. Old Nick. The red one. I brought what I found to my supervisor, expecting him to laugh. He didn't. He closed his office door and asked me where I'd heard about the coal. My grandfather, he said quietly when I asked him why. He grew up in Pennsylvania. Said his uncle disappeared the night after Christmas when he was a kid. They blamed the river, but my grandfather swore there were bells outside the house. He told me to drop it, for my own good. That night, I dreamed of a sack dragging across hardwood floors. The sound woke me up, heart pounding, apartment silent and dark. I lay there for a long time, listening for bells. The break came on January 12th. A store manager in a rural Indiana location called to report a break-in. Not a theft, a return. Someone had left a Santa suit folded neatly on a pallet in the receiving bay. No damage, no note. The beard was damp, stiff at the tips. Dark stains crusted the cuffs and hem. I drove there myself. The suit smelled wrong. Not sweat, not mildew, something metallic beneath the synthetic fur. I took photos, bagged it as evidence, and asked the manager for the security footage. The cameras caught him at 3:17 a.m. He came through the loading dock door without opening it. One frame, it was closed. The next, he was inside. He was tall, too tall. The suit hung oddly on him, stretched across shoulders that seemed too broad, too angular. The beard hid most of his face, but not all of it. His mouth was visible. It wasn't smiling. He walked to the pallet, set the suit down carefully, and stood there for a moment, his head tilted as if listening. Then he turned and looked directly into the camera. The footage glitched. Lines rolled across the screen. When it cleared, the bay was empty. I watched that clip until my eyes hurt. The police confiscated the suit. Forensics found fibers that didn't match any known material. Traces of ash, bone dust. The case stalled. On January 15th, a boy named Lucas was found alive. He wandered out of the woods near his home in Kentucky, barefoot, wearing pajamas stiff with frost. He was dehydrated, hypothermic, but alive. When they asked where he'd been, he said Santa had taken him to the workshop. Doctors chalked it up to trauma. Lucas drew pictures, crayon on paper, a sleigh pulled by animals with too many legs, a man in red with a long, dark mouth, rows of shelves filled with toys and bones side by side, a furnace. When a child psychologist asked him why Santa let him go, Lucas said, "Because I told him I didn't believe." That was the detail that broke me. Belief. I went back to the older cases with that word in mind. Stories of children who stopped believing. Families who didn't celebrate. Houses without trees or stockings. Survivors. I found one living person connected to a case from the 1940s. A woman named Margaret, 93, in a nursing home in Illinois. Her sister had disappeared in 1948. She believed too hard, Margaret told me, voice thin but clear. My sister. She waited up for him every year. Wouldn't sleep, wouldn't blink. Margaret said her parents found the window open and a single bell on the sill. No tracks in the snow. They took down the tree, she said. Never put it up again. Told us it was all nonsense, lies. Margaret lived. That night, driving home through freezing rain, I saw him. On the shoulder of I-70, standing under a dead street light. Red against gray, one hand raised, thumb out as if hitchhiking. Traffic hissed past. No one slowed. As I drove by, his head turned. Our eyes met. I almost lost control of the car. I don't know why he didn't follow me then. Maybe there were rules, maybe January weakened him, maybe he was just letting me know. I stopped sleeping. By February, the disappearances ended. The story faded. People packed away decorations, rolled their eyes at rumors, went back to work. The police quietly closed cases. No suspects, no leads. I quit my job in March. I moved to Arizona, as far from snow as I could get. I told myself heat would burn the memories away. For a while, it worked. Christmas came and went without incident. Palm trees strung with lights, mall Santas sweating through their suits, ordinary men paid by the hour. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then in December, my sister called. Her voice was tight. She lived back east, had 2 kids, a house full of traditions. There's someone outside, she whispered. At the door. Call the police, I said. He says he's Santa. He says he missed the kids last year. I told her to lock herself in the bathroom, to take the kids and go out the window if she had to. I stayed on the line as long as I could. I heard the knock. 1, slow, heavy. I heard bells, then the line went dead. By the time police arrived, the house was empty. No sign of forced entry, no footprints, no Santa. They found a sack under the tree. Inside were toys my niece and nephew had circled in catalogs, still wrapped, still warm, and beneath them a single lump of coal, black and glossy, etched with my sister's name. They never found her or the kids. I went back east for the funeral without bodies. I stood in a church filled with candles and lies and felt something inside me finally break. I started talking, to reporters, to bloggers, to anyone who would listen. I told them Santa was real and he was not what we thought. I told them belief fed him. That tradition gave him access, that we'd invited him in, century after century, with songs and stories and rituals. They called me insane. Online, people mocked me, sent me Santa memes, threatened me, told me to kill myself. But a few listened. They stopped celebrating, took down their trees, told their kids the truth early, let the magic die. And those families, as far as I know, survived. Every year, though, he comes. Not everywhere, not to everyone. Just enough to remind us. I live alone now, in a concrete building with no fireplace, no chimney, no decorations. My windows are sealed, my door reinforced. On Christmas Eve, I sit in the dark and wait. Sometimes I hear bells far away, thin and distant. Sometimes I hear nothing at all. Last year, just after midnight, someone knocked on my door. I didn't answer. The knock came again, patient, polite. A voice spoke through the metal. I know you don't believe, it said, but belief isn't the only gift you ever gave me. I don't sleep on Christmas anymore. I don't think I ever will. Story, the end. The winter I stopped believing in coincidences was the winter I dressed up as Santa Claus and learned why the suit should never be worn lightly. I was 34 years old, divorced, broke, and living in a one-bedroom apartment above a closed-down barber shop in western Pennsylvania. The town was the kind of place people left and only came back to for funerals. I had come back because my father died alone in his recliner and left me nothing but debt, a box of old clothes, and a town that remembered me better than I remembered myself. Christmas was approaching fast, and I needed money. Any money. When I saw the flyer taped to the grocery store bulletin board, "Local mall needs Santa, cash daily," I tore it down before anyone else could. I hadn't worn a costume since high school theater, but desperation lowers standards. The mall was half dead, anchored by a grocery store and a dollar shop. The manager, a woman named Carol with tired eyes and nicotine fingers, barely interviewed me. She looked me over, asked if I could be friendly with kids, and handed me a red velvet suit that smelled like old sweat and something faintly metallic. "Don't wash it," she said. "We've had issues." "What kind of issues?" I asked. She paused, then smiled thinly. "Kids get scared if it smells different." That should have been my first warning. The suit was heavier than it looked. The fabric dragged at my shoulders, and the beard scratched my face like wire. When I put it on in the staff bathroom, I felt an odd pressure in my chest, like stepping into deep water. I told myself it was nerves. The first day went fine. Kids lined up, parents took pictures. I asked what they wanted for Christmas and nodded like I cared. But there were moments, brief, sharp moments, where I knew things I shouldn't. A little girl climbed onto my knee, smiling too wide. Before she spoke, I said, "You don't need to lie about breaking the snow globe. It was an accident." Her smile vanished. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. A boy with a buzz cut and angry eyes sat next. I leaned close and whispered, "Be nicer to your sister. She cries when you lock her in the closet." He jumped off my lap, screaming. Parents laughed it off. Kids are sensitive, they said. But I stopped improvising after that. I stuck to the script. I asked safe questions. I smiled. Still, the knowledge came. Names, secrets, fears. By the third day, I was exhausted in a way sleep didn't fix. I dreamed of snow falling inside my apartment, piling up against the walls. I dreamed of bells ringing far away and hooves scraping wood. On the fourth day, an old man approached me after closing. He wore a janitor's uniform and smelled like bleach. "You shouldn't wear that," he said quietly, nodding at the suit. "It's my job," I replied. He shook his head. "No, it's his." Before I could ask what he meant, he walked away, keys jangling at his belt like tiny bells. I tried to quit that night. Carol didn't answer her phone. I went home, peeled off the suit, and felt immediate relief as soon as it left my body. My hands stopped shaking. My thoughts felt like my own again. I swore I wouldn't go back. At 2:17 a.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. No one was there. I opened the door anyway. The hallway was empty, but something sat on my welcome mat, the Santa suit, folded neatly, clean, warm to the touch. I slammed the door and backed away, heart pounding. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch until dawn, staring at the suit like it might move. When I finally did put it back on, it slid over me like it belonged there, like it had been waiting. That day, the mall was busier. Word had spread about the real Santa. Parents whispered, kids stared. Some cried before even reaching me. A boy about 10 years old stood at the front of the line, pale and shaking. When he sat down, I felt something twist deep in my stomach. "You know why I'm here," I said before I could stop myself. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't mean to." "I know," I said, and I did. I saw it all. His stepfather's rage, the shove, the cracked skull against the bathtub, the lie told through sobs, the adults who believed it because it was easier. My hands tightened on the armrests. "Have you been good this year?" He shook his head violently. The air around us felt colder. The lights flickered. Behind his eyes, I saw something vast and white and endless, stretching through forests and storms, waiting patiently. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. "Break's over," I shouted to no one. Parents stared. Carol rushed over, furious, but I was already walking away, tearing off the beard. That night, the janitor found me sitting in the food court, shaking. "He's awake," the old man said, sitting across from me. "Happens every few decades. Someone puts on the suit and listens too closely." "What is he?" I asked. The janitor sighed. "Older than this town. Older than the idea of Christmas. He learned early that children are easy. They believe in rules. Rewards, punishment. Why me? You're empty, he said simply. Grief makes room. I tried to leave town. My car wouldn't start. The bus was canceled. Roads closed due to weather that hadn't been forecast. On Christmas Eve, the mall closed early. Snow fell hard and silent outside. Carol locked the doors and handed me an envelope of cash. Last day, she said, thank God. I went to the bathroom to change. The mirror was fogged. I wiped it with my sleeve and froze. I was smiling, not my smile, too wide, too knowing. The suit felt tight now, constricting, pulling me inward. My reflection tilted its head. You did well, it said, mouth moving when mine didn't. I won't do this, I whispered. You already are. I stumbled backward and hit the wall. The lights went out. In the darkness, I heard bells. When the lights came back on, the bathroom was empty. The suit was gone, so was the mall. Snow covered everything. Thick drifts pressed against storefronts, burying benches, swallowing the world. The ceiling was gone. Above me stretched a night sky full of slow, drifting snow. Footprints led away from where I stood. Deep. Hooved. I followed them because I didn't know how not to. The forest rose around me, tall and black. The air smelled of pine and iron. In a clearing ahead, something massive moved, hunched and red against the white. He turned as I approached. Santa Claus was taller than any man, his beard crusted with ice, his eyes reflecting starlight like a predator's. His sack lay open beside him. I saw shapes inside. Shoes, toys, bones. You wore my skin, he said, voice like cracking ice. You heard my lists. I didn't agree, I said. He smiled. Belief is consent. He stepped closer. I felt my memories slipping, replaced by rules and names and judgment. I saw children everywhere, lit up like candles in the dark, their sins and secrets floating above them. You can go, he said, or you can stay. Help me. Wear the red forever. I thought of the boy in the chair, of all the others. What happens if I leave? I asked. Santa's smile thinned. Someone else will listen. I don't remember choosing. I remember cold. I remember bells. I woke up in my apartment on Christmas morning. Sunlight streamed through the window. The suit lay folded on the floor, inert. Ordinary. The town was fine. No missing children, no news reports. I burned the suit that afternoon in a steel drum behind the barber shop. The smoke smelled like pine and hair and something screaming. I moved away the next day. Every December since, I hear bells in my dreams. And sometimes when I pass a mall Santa, the man inside the suit looks at me with fear and relief and understanding all at once. Santa Claus is real, and he is always looking for someone to help him carry the load. Story the end. I grew up believing in Santa longer than most kids, not because my parents encouraged it, but because something in our house made it impossible not to. Christmas never felt imaginary to me. It felt watched. We lived in northern Minnesota, the kind of place where winter erased everything, and the cold didn't just bite, it hunted. Our house sat at the edge of a logging town that had been dying since the 70s. Empty storefronts, one blinking traffic light, woods thick enough that sunlight struggled to reach the ground. My father worked nights at the paper mill. My mother cleaned houses. I was an only child, alone a lot, and I learned early to listen. Every December, starting around the 20th, I heard bells, not the cheerful jingle you hear in stores. These were slow, heavy, measured, like something large moving carefully so it wouldn't slip on the ice. They always came from outside, from the woods behind our house. And every year, without fail, something changed in my parents when the bells started. My mother would pull the curtains tight before sunset. My father would double-check the locks, then check them again. They stopped letting me leave the house after dark. They stopped inviting people over, and they never, ever talked about why. When I was 7, I asked my mother why Santa never came to our house. She froze at the kitchen sink, her back to me. The water kept running. After a long time, she said, "He knows better." That should have scared me. Instead, it made me curious. On Christmas Eve that year, the power went out during a snowstorm. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the walls. We lit candles and sat in the living room. My father sat rigid in his chair, eyes on the front door. My mother clutched a rosary I had never seen before. Then the bells rang. They were close, too close, right outside. My father stood so fast his chair fell backward. He grabbed a shotgun from the closet and pointed it at the door, hands shaking. The knock came next, 3 slow knocks. I remember thinking how polite it sounded. A voice followed, deep and warm and smiling. "Merry Christmas. My mother whispered my name like a prayer. My father shouted for whoever it was to leave. The voice laughed softly. "I brought what you asked for," it said. Something scraped across the porch, heavy being dragged. I heard wood creak under weight. My father screamed at me to go to my room. I didn't. I stood frozen in the hallway, peeking around the corner. The door began to open. My father fired. The blast shook the house. Splinters flew from the door frame. Smoke filled the room. I screamed. When the smoke cleared, the door stood open. There was no one there. No blood. No body. Just a sack on the porch. It was red, thick cloth, stained dark at the bottom. Something inside shifted, slow and wet. The bells rang once more, farther away now, retreating into the storm. My parents didn't sleep that night, neither did I. In the morning, the sack was gone. My father boarded up the door and said nothing. My mother cried quietly while washing the floor, scrubbing at stains that weren't there. That was the last Christmas we spent together. My mother left in January. She packed a single suitcase and kissed my forehead like she was saying goodbye forever. She never told me where she was going. My father drank himself into silence. By spring, he was dead, found frozen in his truck behind the mill, keys still in the ignition. I went to live with my aunt in Wisconsin. She told me my parents were sick people who believed strange things. She threw out every Christmas decoration we owned. She forbade bells in the house. For a while, life felt normal, until the bells found me again. They followed me through childhood like a shadow. Every December, no matter where we lived, no matter how far from the woods, I heard them. Sometimes distant, sometimes close, always patient. People went missing every year around Christmas in the towns we lived in. Drifters, shut-ins, kids from bad homes, the kind of people who slipped through cracks easily. The papers called it coincidence. Cold weather, accidents. I knew better. When I was 16, my aunt disappeared on Christmas Eve. She had gone out to take the trash and never came back. No footprints, no struggle. Just an empty bin tipped on its side and a single bell left behind in the snow. The police questioned me for hours. I told them everything. They exchanged looks and asked if I had ever seen a therapist. I aged out of foster care 2 years later and joined the Army, thinking discipline and distance would save me. I served 2 tours overseas. I survived things that should have killed me. None of it scared me as much as December did. Even in the desert, I heard the bells. After my discharge, I settled in Ohio. New name, new job. I worked nights at a storage facility, lived alone, kept my world small. I never decorated, never celebrated, never opened my door after dark in December. Then my girlfriend got pregnant. Emily loved Christmas. She loved lights and music and traditions. I tried to explain why I hated it, but fear sounds ridiculous when spoken aloud. She thought I needed healing, not hiding. Our son was born in October. By December, the bells were back, louder than ever. Emily decorated the apartment despite my protests. She bought a small bell for the crib, said it was traditional. I threw it away. It came back the next day, sitting neatly on the dresser. On Christmas Eve, Emily begged me to relax. Snow fell outside. The apartment felt too quiet. Then the power went out. I felt my blood turn to ice. The bells rang. They were inside the apartment. Our son began to cry. I ran to the nursery. He was gone. The window was open. Snow blew in. The bell lay on the floor, ringing softly on its own. From the living room, I heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, confident. I grabbed a kitchen knife and stepped into the hallway. He stood there. He was taller than I remembered, broader. His red coat looked stitched from many different fabrics, some old, some newer, all stained dark. His beard hung thick and matted, braided in places with ribbons and teeth. His eyes were pale blue, almost glowing in the dark. "You didn't teach him the rules," he said gently. I lunged. The knife snapped like plastic against his arm. He didn't flinch. He grabbed my throat and lifted me off the ground effortlessly. "You owe," he said. "Your family has owed for a long time." I choked out my son's name. He smiled. "He's learning," he said. "He'll make a fine one." Emily screamed from the bedroom. The man turned his head, considering. "She'll do," he decided. I watched him walk away, carrying my son in one arm like a sack of grain, Emily screaming and clawing at him until the bells rang so loud my ears bled. Then they were gone. The apartment was empty. The police didn't believe me. They never do. Emily and my son vanished without a trace. No forced entry, no fingerprints, no explanation. I broke after that. I drank. I screamed at strangers. I was committed twice. Doctors called it trauma-induced psychosis, seasonal delusions. They medicated me into numbness, but December always cut through. Last year, I stopped running. I went back to Minnesota, back to the woods, back to where it started. The logging town was almost entirely abandoned now. Cedar Hollow Road was barely visible beneath the snow. The woods pressed in close, breathing. I followed the bells. They led me to a clearing that had never appeared on any map. A workshop stood there, massive and crooked, smoke pouring from chimneys made of bone. Sleighs rested against trees. Not one sleigh, dozens. Inside, the sound was unbearable. Bells, hammers, screams. I saw them then, the Santas. There were many of them. Men of all ages, all sizes, all wearing red coats in various states of decay. Some stitched toys, some sharpened hooks, some dragged sacks that moaned and begged, and at the center of it all stood the first one, the oldest, the one with eyes like winter sky. He saw me and smiled. "You came home," he said. I asked him what he was. He laughed. "We are what people needed," he said, "what winter demanded. We bring balance. We take what the cold would take anyway." I asked about my son. He pointed. I saw a small figure in red, standing stiff and silent, eyes empty, a bell sewn into his sleeve. "He will ring for others," the old one said, "as you once did." I fell to my knees and begged. The old Santa leaned close, his breath smelling of rotten pine. "There is only one way to stop it," he said. He handed me a coat. Red, heavy, warm. The bells rang. Now it's December again. I stand at the edge of a town, bells at my waist, sack at my feet. I knock. I smile. Merry Christmas. Story the end. The first time I saw him, I was 34 years old, sober for 11 months, and working the overnight shift at a distribution warehouse off Route 9 in upstate New York. Christmas was 3 weeks away. Snow had been falling since dusk, a steady, dry hiss that turned the parking lot into a pale, soundless sheet. At 2:17 a.m., the motion sensor by Bay Door C tripped, even though the door was sealed and the padlock was intact. The camera feed flickered, light, then steadied. For 3 frames, less than a second, there was a shape where the loading dock should have been empty. Tall, broad, red, but not the red of cloth. More like the color you see when you press your thumb hard against your eyelid. I chalked it up to interference. Cameras do that in cold weather. I was tired. When you work nights long enough, your brain learns to lie to you. By the time the snow stopped at dawn, the memory had already softened around the edges, a dream half forgotten. I would have forgotten it entirely if not for the bell. The bell came from the break room. It rang once. A clean, bright sound, wrong in a place that smelled of burnt coffee and forklift oil. I followed it down the hall, my boots squeaking. The bell rang again. On the table where the vending machine sat, there was a small brass bell, the kind you'd see on a hotel counter. It was warm to the touch. Under it, a card written in a careful hand. "You heard me. I quit the warehouse a week later. Not because of the bell. Because of the man who came in the night before Christmas Eve, asking if anyone had seen a truck with reindeer painted on the side. He wore a red coat that looked old enough to be felt instead of fabric, and the white trim was dingy, matted with something dark. His beard wasn't fluffy, it hung in ropes, wet as if he'd come in from the rain. His eyes were wrong, too clear, too reflective. When I told him no, he smiled and said, "That's all right. I find my own ways in." If this were a story told over beers, this is where someone would laugh and say I'd spooked myself. They'd ask why I didn't call the cops. They'd ask why I didn't take a picture. I can't give you a neat answer. I can tell you that when he left, the motion sensor tripped again, and the camera showed nothing at all. After that winter, I started asking questions. You learn a lot if you listen to people who don't think anyone's listening. Old-timers at diners, night nurses, janitors who've worked the same schools for decades. They all had stories they told once and never again. Bells, footsteps on roofs that didn't belong to raccoons, chimneys that weren't wide enough for a cat, much less a man, presents that smelled like copper, a red sleeve seen in a hallway where no one should have been. I drove west in the spring, following the rumors like breadcrumbs. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. Everywhere I went, I heard variations of the same thing, always wrapped in shame, like a secret that made the teller complicit just by speaking it aloud. "It's not him," they'd say, then hesitate. But it is. In a town outside Terre Haute, I met a woman named Janice, who ran a thrift store that doubled as a church basement when it flooded. She had a bell behind the counter identical to the one from the break room. When I touched it, she slapped my hand away hard enough to leave a welt. "Don't," she said. "He hears it." Janice had been a mall Santa's wife in the 80s. Her husband, Bill, had loved kids in the safe, ordinary way. Bad jokes, peppermint candies, fake ho-ho-ho that made his cheeks ache. One December, a man had come backstage during a charity drive. Red coat, wet beard. He'd leaned close and whispered something in Bill's ear. Bill had laughed, then gone pale. He'd gone out for his shift and never come home. They found his Santa suit folded neatly in the dumpster behind the mall. No body, no footprints. Just the bell sitting on the concrete, warm. "He takes what he needs," Janice said. "Faces, names, work." I asked her why no one talked about it. She smiled without humor, because it's easier to pretend a story is a lie than to admit it's a job opening. By the time December rolled around again, I'd heard enough to know there was a pattern. He appeared in places where people worked nights, places where bells rang, places where doors were watched by tired eyes. He didn't kill children. He didn't have to. He killed the people who stood between him and them. I tried to stop him once. This is the part I don't like telling because it makes me sound like I thought I was the hero of something. I wasn't. I was angry and sober and full of the kind of confidence that comes from not having been proven wrong yet. I took a seasonal job at a department store in a suburb of Minneapolis. Loss prevention. Overnights. Bells everywhere. Cameras that cut out when the heat kicked on. I learned the rhythm of the place. When the cleaners came through, when the freight elevators sighed, when the old man who fixed the escalators took his smoke break. On Christmas Eve, after the store closed, I sat in the security office and watched the snow thicken on the feed. At 1:03 a.m., a shape moved on camera 7. Red. Tall. The feed fuzzed. The bell on the desk rang once. He didn't come through the door. He came through the wall. I know how that sounds. I watched the cinder block ripple like a pond under rain, then settle. He stepped out of it, whole and heavy, boots leaving wet prints that steamed on the tile. Up close, he smelled like cold metal and old blood. His coat wasn't stitched. It looked grown. His eyes reflected me back in fragments, like broken ornaments. He smiled with too many teeth. "You're early," he said, voice like a choir warming up in a furnace room. I told him to leave. I told him he wasn't welcome. I told him I'd called the police, which was a lie. He listened politely, head cocked. When I finished, he nodded. "Good," he said. "You remember the lines." He reached into his coat and pulled out a list. It was long, names I recognized. Janitors, guards, cashiers, people who worked when the world slept. He ran a finger down it and stopped at mine. "You've been very busy," he said. "That's good. Work is holy." I don't remember pulling the fire axe from its case, but I must have. I remember the sound it made when it hit him, like splitting a frozen log. I remember the way the blade stuck, not in flesh, but in something fibrous and springy. He looked down at it, curious. "Oh," he said, "you brought a toy." He took the axe and bent it into a U with one hand. He rang the bell with the other. Somewhere far away, something answered. I ran. I don't know how I got out of the store. I remember the snow, thick as wool, and the way the parking lot lights turned everything yellow. I remember slipping, falling, scraping my hands raw on the ice. I remember laughter, not loud, not mocking, just pleased. They never found him. They never find him. In the morning, the store manager blamed a burst pipe for the water damage. The cleaners said the footprints had been washed away. Loss prevention said the cameras had malfunctioned. I quit without notice and drove until the gas light came on, then kept driving on fumes. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought that if I stayed away from bells and nights and lists, I'd be safe. I was wrong. He came for me 2 years later in a place that had no right to him at all, a hospice in New Mexico where my mother was dying. The desert was cold at night. The windows rattled. The nurses wore bells on their shoes so patients could hear them coming. I sat by my mother's bed and held her hand and listened to the bells move down the hall like a small, sad parade. When he stepped into the room, she smiled. "Oh," she said, "I wondered when you'd come." He took off his hat. His head was bald and scarred, skin pale as milk. He knelt by the bed like a man at church. "You've been very good," he told her. "You kept him alive." She squeezed my hand. "I tried," she said. "I'm tired." He looked at me then. Up close, I could see the seams, the places where faces had been added and worn away. The red of his coat pulsed, slow as a heartbeat. "You can't have her," I said. He stood. "I don't want her," he said gently. "I want you to see." He rang the bell. The room filled with sound, not loud but everywhere, 1,000 tiny chimes layered until my teeth ached. Images crowded my head. Nights, roofs, doors opening without opening. Men and women taken into the red and coming back hollow, smiling too much, ringing bells for him in places he couldn't be yet. "He's not one man," my mother whispered. "He's the work." She died at dawn. When the nurse came in, the bell on her shoe was warm. I stopped running after that. I started writing things down. Names, places, dates, patterns. If I couldn't stop him, maybe I could slow him. Maybe I could warn people who worked nights to watch the walls and the bells and the places where cold gathered. That's why I'm writing this now. Because it's December again, and the lists are longer than they used to be, because the work has grown, because he's learned new ways in. I hear him on the roof sometimes, even in buildings that don't have roofs. I hear the bells when there aren't any bells to hear. If you work nights, listen to me. If you guard doors, if you clean after everyone's gone home, if you watch cameras that flicker when the heat kicks on, listen. If you hear a bell ring where no bell should be, don't answer it. If you see red where there shouldn't be red, don't look too long. If a man in a wet beard asks if you've seen his truck, lie. Lie well. And if you're reading this because you think it's a story, that's fine. Stories are safer than the truth. Just remember this. Work is holy to him, and he always pays his helpers in bells. Story, the end. I never believed in Santa Claus the way other kids did. Not really. My parents were practical people, Midwestern to the bone, the kind who wrapped presents neatly and labeled them with careful handwriting. Still, every December, the town of Hollow Creek went all in. Lights on every porch, inflatable Santas wobbling on lawns, the old courthouse square dressed up like a postcard. Hollow Creek, Ohio isn't a place people pass through. You end up there by accident or because your family's been there forever. Mine had. My grandfather worked at the paper mill. My father became a deputy sheriff. I came back after college because my mother got sick and someone had to look after the house. That was the winter. Everything happened. It was December 10th when the first kid went missing. The boy's name was Tyler Moore. 7 years old. Blonde hair, front tooth missing, the kind of kid who waved at everyone. He vanished sometime after dinner. His boots were found by the fireplace, neatly lined up like he'd taken them off himself. The window was locked from the inside. No footprints in the snow. People whispered, of course. But Hollow Creek doesn't like ugly explanations. The police chalked it up to a runaway, even though no 7-year-old runs away barefoot in December. The town prayed. The church filled up, candles burned, then another kid disappeared. And another. Always the same details. Fireplace. Boots or shoes lined up. No sign of forced entry. No tracks. No witnesses. By December 17th, fear settled into Hollow Creek like a second snowfall. Parents kept their kids inside. Curtains stayed drawn. Christmas music stopped playing in grocery stores because it felt wrong. That's when I started remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. When I was 9, I woke up one Christmas Eve to a sound on the roof. Heavy, deliberate, not like raccoons or branches. I remember freezing under my blankets, heart pounding, listening to something move across the shingles. Then came the sound from the fireplace. A scrape. A dull thud. I didn't get out of bed. I didn't scream. I lay there until morning and told myself it was a dream. But when I went downstairs, the cookies my mom had left out were gone. Not eaten. Gone. Plate clean. Milk untouched but frozen solid. A thin sheet of ice sealing the top. My parents laughed it off, said I must have eaten them myself and forgotten. I believed them. Until Hollow Creek started losing children. I worked nights at the local diner then, the kind of place where truckers and cops drink bad coffee and pretend they aren't scared. That week, nobody joked. Nobody lingered. Everyone watched the windows. On December 18th, Sheriff Bill Hanratty sat across from me in a cracked vinyl booth, stirring sugar into his coffee like it offended him. "You look like hell," he said. "Thanks," I replied. He leaned in. "You ever notice anything strange when you were a kid? Around Christmas?" I stopped wiping the counter. "Why? Just asking." His eyes flicked to the door. "These cases don't make sense. No evidence, no motive, no suspects." "People are saying things," I said. He snorted. "People say dumb things. They're saying Santa Claus is taking the kids." The spoon stopped clinking. Henratty looked up slowly. Who said that? Everyone, I said. Quietly. He rubbed his face. Christ. That night, as I walked home through snow that squeaked under my boots, I felt watched. Streetlights hummed overhead, casting long shadows. Decorations blinked half-heartedly. When I reached my house, something was wrong. The porch light was on. I never left it on. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled cold, sharper than usual, like iron and old smoke. I stepped into the living room and froze. Someone had been there. The fireplace was clean, scrubbed down to bare brick, ashes gone, tools rearranged. On the mantel sat a single object, a small brass bell, tarnished and old. I recognized it immediately. It had been on my grandfather's workbench when I was a kid. He told me once it was from the old days and never explained further. I hadn't seen it in decades. My hands shook as I picked it up. The metal was warm. That night, I dreamed of snow falling upward into a black sky, of bells ringing too close to my ears, of a voice reciting names, one after another, in a patient, endless tone. I woke up to screaming. It came from down the street. I ran outside barefoot, cold biting into my skin. A crowd had gathered at the Petersons' house. Mrs. Peterson was on her knees in the snow, clawing at the ground, shrieking. Her daughter, Lily, 6 years old, was gone. The fireplace, the shoes, the silence. That was when the town broke. No one waited for explanations anymore. People boarded up fireplaces, blocked chimneys, slept in shifts. Guns appeared on nightstands. It didn't matter. The thing didn't need chimneys. On December 20th, the mayor called a town meeting. The gymnasium filled with angry, terrified people. Someone shouted about Satan. Someone else blamed immigrants. Someone cried that God was punishing us. An old man stood up in the back. I recognized him. Walter Finch. 90 if he was a day. Lived alone at the edge of town. You've all forgotten, he said, voice thin but steady. The room quieted. Forgotten what? The mayor asked. Walter's eyes scanned the crowd. What Santa really is. Laughter broke out, nervous, sharp. I'm serious, Walter said. He's not a story. He's not a man. He's older than this town, older than this country. Hanratty stood. Sit down, Walter. No, Walter snapped. I was a boy when it last happened. My brother was taken, so were others, and the town made a deal. The word deal settled over us like frost. What deal? Someone yelled. Walter swallowed. We fed him. Silence. Fed him what? The naughty, Walter said. The unwanted. The ones nobody would miss. My stomach turned. Once a year, Walter continued, the town chose a name, one child. And in return, Santa left the rest alone. Prosperity followed. The mill thrived. Crops grew. People were happy. This is insane, the mayor said. You broke the deal, Walter said, pointing a shaking finger. You stopped believing, stopped choosing, stopped remembering. So now he's choosing for himself. The gym erupted, shouting, crying, rage. I stumbled out into the cold, lungs burning. Memories crashed through me. The bell, the roof, the frozen milk. That night, I went to my father's old study. He'd been dead 10 years, but his things were still there. I dug through boxes until I found his journals from when he was deputy. December entries were sparse, pages torn out. One entry stopped me cold. December 24th. We did it again. I hate myself. But the town lives. My hands trembled. There was something else tucked into the journal. A list. Names crossed out. Dates next to them. Every December. Going back decades. At the bottom, written in a different hand, was a warning. If the list ends, he comes for all. On December 22nd, the bells started ringing. Not church bells, not wind chimes. Bells that followed you, no matter where you went. Soft, mocking jingles just at the edge of hearing. People barricaded themselves inside. Children cried. Dogs went mad. That night, I saw him. I was driving home from the diner when the road ahead darkened unnaturally. Snow fell thick and fast, swallowing the headlights. I slowed, heart hammering. Then he stepped into the road. He was tall. Too tall. His suit was red once, but now it looked soaked, darkened, crusted. The white trim was gray and stiff. His beard hung in clumps, matted and frozen. And his eyes, there were no whites, just endless black, reflecting nothing. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded. The engine died. He walked toward me, boots crunching softly. Bells jingled with every step. You remember, he said. His voice was deep, layered, like many voices speaking together. I couldn't move. You remember better than most, he continued. That is why I came to you. What do you want? I whispered. He smiled and his mouth was wrong. Too wide, too full of teeth meant for tearing, not smiling. A name, he said. No, I said. He leaned down, face inches from the glass, the windshield frosted instantly. Then I will take them all. He stepped back. The car engine roared to life. The road was empty. On December 23rd, the town decided. They didn't announce it. They didn't vote publicly. But by evening, everyone knew. They had chosen a child, a boy named Aaron Klein. 8 years old. Foster kid. No relatives nearby. Quiet. I found his name written on the courthouse chalkboard, already smudged like it had been there a long time. I vomited in the snow. That night, I went to Aaron's house. His foster parents were packing, frantic, trying to leave town. I told them the roads were closed, that it wasn't safe. They didn't listen. At midnight, the bells rang louder than ever. The sky glowed faintly red. I stayed with Aaron. Sat on the floor in front of the fireplace, a shotgun in my lap, heart pounding. "You're not Santa," Aaron said softly, and I'm not. "Is he coming?" "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Okay." The air grew cold. The fireplace blackened. Soot poured out like smoke. He emerged slowly, unfolding himself from the chimney like something born wrong. The room shrank around him. I fired. The blast echoed. The shot tore through his chest and did nothing. The wound closed like melting wax. He laughed. The sound shattered glass. "Thank you for remembering," he said. He reached for Aaron. I stepped in front of him. "Take me," I said. He paused. His head tilted. "You are too old." "Then take both of us," I said. He studied me for a long moment. Then his smile faded. "You still do not understand," he said. "I am not punishment. I am tradition." He took Aaron. The next morning, the bells stopped. The snow eased. The roads cleared. Hollow Creek went on. The papers called it a tragedy. Another missing child. Case unsolved. People celebrated Christmas quietly. Presents were opened. Food was eaten. Laughter sounded forced. Years have passed. I still live here. Every December, a list appears in the courthouse. One name, chosen carefully. People pretend not to see it. And every Christmas Eve, I hear bells on the roof. Santa Claus still comes to Hollow Creek, and he always gets his due. Story the end. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York called Mill Creek, the kind of town where Christmas was bigger than Thanksgiving and bigger than July 4th combined. The entire town transformed in December. Store windows were decorated with fake snow, the firehouse strung colored lights on the garage doors, and the town square hosted a parade that always ended with Santa Claus. But not just any Santa. Ours was Old Man Harlan, a man who had been playing Santa in Mill Creek longer than anyone could remember. He wasn't a volunteer, wasn't someone hired through a company. He was a permanent figure, a fixture like the street lamps or the clock tower, and he claimed to have been doing it since before most of the parents in town were born. Old Man Harlan lived alone on the edge of town in a creaky Victorian house with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Nobody knew much about him beyond that he used to work at the mill and that he always had candy canes in his coat pockets. Kids loved him. Parents trusted him. He had a gentle, booming voice, a twinkle in his eye, and a laugh that sounded like it came from a chimney, or so everyone thought. I was 9 the first time I sat on his lap. It was at the town hall, in a room filled with the smell of pine, hot chocolate, and something faintly metallic. My little brother was squirming beside me, impatient, and my parents were laughing and taking pictures. Harlan's suit was immaculate, red velvet, white fur trim, but there was something about it that made the back of my neck itch. Something about the way he looked at me as I climbed onto his lap. "What's your name, young man?" he asked, his voice low but not unpleasant. I told him, and he nodded as if he'd already known. "And have you been good this year?" I nodded. He leaned in closer, so close that I could smell peppermint mixed with some other sour odor. "I know when kids tell the truth," he said softly. "I know when they lie." I laughed nervously. He smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes. His hand rested lightly on my knee, and for a moment I felt the weight of it, heavier than it should have been. "You'll see," he said, letting go. "I see everything." I was too young to understand what he meant. I thought it was just part of the magic, part of the joke adults tell themselves to make Christmas feel safer. The first child disappeared the following winter. Her name was Abby Reed. She was 7, lived down the street from me. Her parents reported her missing on December 22nd. She had been walking home from a friend's house when she never showed up. The town organized a search party. We combed the woods, the creek, the old mill, and even the frozen fields. Days later, they found her jacket snagged on a tree branch near the edge of the woods. No other trace, no footprints leading away. Nothing. Old man Harlan attended the vigil. He stood quietly in the corner, head bowed, hat in hand. Nobody suspected him. Nobody wanted to. He was Mill Creek Santa. He was safe. He was part of the town's mythology, a beloved figure who had outlived spouses, jobs, and neighbors. Over the years, more children vanished. The cases were scattered. Different towns, different years, but all December. All young. All with brief interactions with Harlan. Each time he attended the funerals or vigils, always solemn, always comforting. By the time I was 13, I started noticing patterns. I volunteered at the town hall for the annual holiday festival, mostly to avoid my parents nagging. Harlan's workshop was in the old gymnasium, a small classroom repurposed for photos and candy. Between children, he would disappear into the storage room, always alone. No elves, no assistants, no one else around. One afternoon, a little girl didn't come out when she was supposed to. Her mother called, worried. I knocked on the door. "Just a moment," Harlan called. The door stayed closed for a long minute. Finally, it opened. The girl emerged, quiet, eyes wide, cheeks flushed. She didn't speak. She walked past her mother without a word. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brother noticed, but I just stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the image of Harlan, crouching with that girl, whispering something she couldn't or wouldn't repeat. 2 days later, the girl vanished. The case went cold for college and tried to put it behind me. Life in the city felt safer, more ordinary, but I couldn't escape the memories. Every December, the fear resurfaced. Every time I saw a mall Santa, I remembered the smell of peppermint mixed with something sour, the weight of a hand that didn't feel right. Years later, I returned to Mill Creek to care for my mother after my father died. The town had changed, but not completely. Harlan was still Santa. Older now, slower, but still there. He still remembered names, still had that same precise twinkle in his eye. I was working at the local newspaper then, helping archive old files. One day, while scanning old photographs of the town festival, I noticed something I had never paid attention to as a child. In nearly every photo of Harlan with children, his eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were looking at the child. Always studying, always measuring, I started to dig. Police records, missing children reports, old news articles. Patterns emerged. December. Children of similar ages, same towns, same strange disappearances, and each had some recorded interaction with Harlan shortly before the event. I showed my findings to my editor. He laughed. "You're chasing ghosts," he said. "Harlan is part of the town's charm." I tried to forget. I failed. That Christmas Eve, Harlan called the newspaper office. He asked for me by name. His voice was deep, calm, and unsettling. "I hear you've been asking questions," he said. "Thought we should talk." I knew instinctively not to go, but curiosity and perhaps a lingering sense of guilt drove me there. His farmhouse was cold, though it smelled of pine and cinnamon. Every surface was meticulously decorated. Every room had small toys, handmade ornaments, candy canes, and jars. He greeted me warmly, pouring coffee with shaking hands that were unnervingly steady. "You know why people trust Santa?" he asked. "No," I said. "Because Santa sees everything," he said. "He judges, he rewards, he punishes. That's what makes him necessary." I felt my stomach turn. "Accidents happen," he continued. "Stories get in the way. People don't understand duty, they forget tradition. But I remember everything." When I left, my car wouldn't start. He stood on the porch watching silently as I tried to turn it over. Finally, it started. He tipped his hat, and I drove away, heart pounding, aware I was being watched, even as I escaped. That December, a boy named Lucas went missing. 10 years old. His parents worked late. He walked home alone. The town searched. Nothing. Harlan was questioned, but he had alibis, witnesses, photographs. Nothing. The parade went on as scheduled. Harlan waved from the sleigh, smiling, the face of Mill Creek Christmas. That night, his farmhouse caught fire. Flames consumed the structure before the fire department could contain it. Harlan was found inside. The coroner was shocked. In addition to Harlan's body, the basement crawl space contained dozens of boxes filled with toys, clothing, photographs, and, disturbingly, human hair. Names were carved into wooden beams, some decades old, some recent. Evidence spanning generations of disappearances. National news covered it. Coldwater canceled all public Christmas events the following year. People tried to explain it away. Copycats. delusions, trauma, coincidence. But those of us who remembered knew better. Even after Harlan was gone, strange incidents continued. Children reported seeing Santa in places he couldn't physically be. Packages of toys appeared at homes where no one had ordered them. Candy canes left in mailboxes, old and brittle. Snowmen outside homes in the dead of night, standing unnaturally still. One Christmas Eve, years later, I was working late at the newspaper office. I heard bells outside, slow and deliberate. I looked out the window and saw a figure under the streetlight. The suit was tattered, older, and the beard singed. Eyes sharp and alive. He tipped his hat at me. I locked myself in the bathroom and called the police. When they arrived, there was nothing, only snow and a single footprint pressed deep into the ground. I left Mill Creek again permanently. I don't decorate anymore. I don't attend parades. I don't let my daughter believe in Santa. I check locks, windows, chimneys. Every December, I watch the news, see reports of missing children and strange sightings, and I know the truth. Santa Claus isn't just a story. He isn't a man. He's a role, a mask, a tradition that hides its teeth behind a smile. And as long as someone is willing to wear the suit, to keep the list, to justify the watching, Santa never dies. Story the end. The first time I saw him, I didn't know what I was looking at. I was 27, a deputy in northern Michigan, and it had started snowing in late November. The kind of snow that comes fast, heavy, and quiet, blanketing the small towns and forests so thoroughly that even familiar roads feel strange and dangerous. I was called to a welfare check at a farmhouse about 10 miles out of town, where a neighbor hadn't seen the Martins for a couple of days. I parked my cruiser on the edge of the driveway and got out, crunching through the thickening snow. The house sat isolated, framed by pines, their branches heavy and white. The front door was slightly ajar. I knocked and announced myself, but no one answered. I drew my flashlight and pushed the door fully open. Inside, the living room was immaculate. The Christmas tree in the corner was fully decorated, lights flickering softly, stockings hung from the mantel. Gifts sat under the tree, neatly wrapped. The smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air. I called out again, louder this time, my voice echoing in the quiet house. Then I saw them. Mr. and Mrs. Martin were both in the living room, sitting upright in their chairs as if frozen mid-movement. Their eyes were open, staring blankly, and their throats were crushed, something so deliberate and violent I couldn't imagine it being accidental. There was no blood spatter, no sign of a struggle. Just removed. The boy, Jacob, age 7, was missing. The only footprints were a set of enormous boot prints in the snow leading from the front door into the woods behind the house. They were too large for a man, too wide and deep. I followed them for a while, but they vanished suddenly, leaving only disturbed snow and a faint ringing in my ears, like distant bells. When Jacob was found 3 days later, wandering alone along a frozen creek, he was wearing a red coat that didn't belong to him. He had no injuries, no frostbite, nothing that should have allowed him to survive the nights in the woods. When asked where he had been, he looked up at the officers with wide, serious eyes. "Santa took me," he said. I laughed nervously. It was an instinct to explain something impossible with childish imagination. But Jacob's face was serious, too serious. His lips were pale from the cold, but his cheeks were flushed. His eyes were dark and knowing, like a child who had seen too much. The Martins case went cold officially, filed as an unsolved double homicide and child abduction. But the reports I found afterward in old county records and newspapers told a different story. Families disappearing around Christmas was not new in Michigan, or even the Midwest. There were scattered accounts stretching back to the early 1900s. Children returned unharmed, adults dead, homes immaculate, chimneys damaged, no signs of forced entry. And in almost every instance, the children claimed Santa had taken them or had visited them during the night. I tried to dismiss it, rationalize it, but it lingered. When December rolled around the following year, the snow returned early, heavier than normal. A series of calls came in, reports of something moving on rooftops, doors forced open without signs of burglary, children claiming to hear bells in the night. None of these cases were linked publicly, but internally, the sheriff's office was aware. By 2010, I was transferred to a small town in Wisconsin. I had a wife, Claire, and a 6-year-old daughter named Hannah. She was smart, curious, and loved Christmas more than anything. I tried to keep her safe from what I knew, though I had no way of explaining it. She wrote her letters to Santa faithfully, listing toys and games she wanted. It started subtly. At first, it was just sounds. Bells jingling faintly outside her bedroom window, soft footsteps in the attic, the faint smell of pine, and something else I couldn't identify. Hannah told me she heard someone climbing on the roof. She said it sounded like heavy boots, moving slowly but deliberately. I told her it was the house settling, the wind, animals. She didn't argue, only nodded, as if accepting my explanation. Then other families began reporting the same patterns. Houses with decorations already up saw strange activity at night. Parents were found dead in their beds or living rooms, typically with crushed throats or broken necks, no signs of a struggle. Children went missing, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. And always the homes were immaculate afterward, decorated perfectly as if nothing had happened, except for the absence of the adults. On December 21st, the snowstorm hit. Roads were impassable. Power went out. Cell phones failed. Claire and Hannah were upstairs when I heard it for the first time that night. Bells, slow and deliberate, ringing outside the house. Heavy thumps followed, each one timed like a heartbeat. I grabbed my gun and flashlight, convinced it was an intruder, but nothing in my experience prepared me for what I saw. I peeked through the curtains. A figure stood at the edge of the yard, obscured by blowing snow. Tall, broad, and wrapped in a deep red coat, matted and worn. Bells hung from a wide belt around his middle. His face was hidden by a thick beard, tangled and stiff. I couldn't make out his eyes, but I felt them, dark and cold, fixed on the house. The snow around him didn't settle the way it should have. It piled against him, and yet he was untouched. I stepped back. My breath caught in my throat. The front door rattled under a single enormous impact. The figure moved forward, effortlessly breaking in. I fired my gun repeatedly, but the bullets had no effect. They sank into the coat like it was water. Each step he took caused the floorboards to creak with unnatural weight. Hannah screamed from upstairs. Claire tried to grab her, but he was faster, moving like time itself had slowed. He lifted Hannah effortlessly, her small body against his massive chest, and spoke in a deep, resonant voice that made the room vibrate. "She has been good," he said, "but she must learn." I lunged, grabbed anything I could, anything that could slow him. He turned, his eyes now visible, coal black and unblinking. The sound of bells filled the room, each one ringing as if in celebration. I felt a pressure in my chest, a weight pressing down, and then everything went black. When I came to, the house was quiet. The snowstorm had passed. Claire was alive, barely, pinned in a closet where she had hidden. Hannah was gone. The only trace left was a small red mitten on the floor near the broken front door. Emergency services arrived hours later, finding me incoherent, shaking, babbling about Santa Claus. They found no evidence of forced entry besides the broken door, no signs of struggle, no footprints except my own. The investigation was inconclusive, filed as an unexplained abduction. 2 days later, Hannah returned. She walked out of the woods behind the house at dawn and wearing a red coat much too large for her. She was unharmed, calm, almost eerily mature for her age. She whispered that he had been watching, that she had been good, and that she must always be careful. Since then, every December, the pattern repeats. Bells, footsteps on the roof, children acting unusually obedient, families reporting strange activity. I moved multiple times trying to escape it, but it follows, always in December, always near homes with children who believe. Hannah is 14 now. She sets a plate of cookies by the fireplace every Christmas Eve. Sometimes when the wind howls through the trees and snow covers the world in silence, I hear bells. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I know he is coming again. I don't believe in Santa Claus. I know he is real. Story the end. I was 25 and broke when I agreed to take the job. The ad was simple. Santa needed for private estate, December 20 to 25th. Must have own costume. The pay was good. Better than anything I could find at the time. I didn't care much about kids, didn't even like them that much. I needed the money. What could go wrong? I drove 3 hours to a mansion on the outskirts of a small Pennsylvania town. Snow covered the drive like powdered sugar, thick enough to make the headlights glow hazily in the night. The place was massive, a sprawling Victorian with turrets, stained glass, and more chimneys than seemed possible. I parked and noticed there was no one outside to greet me. That was odd, but I shrugged. Wealthy people do weird things, I thought. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman, older, pale, dressed in a gray wool coat, stepped aside wordlessly. She led me inside, up a staircase with carpets that muffled our footsteps. The hallways smelled of pine, old wood, and something faintly metallic underneath. She didn't say much, just guided me to a room that looked like a cross between a costume shop and a storage closet. A Santa suit hung on a wooden mannequin. Red velvet, fur trim caked in dirt, boots scuffed as if walked through decades of snow and ash. I hesitated, but the pay was good. I slipped into it. The moment the wool touched my skin, it felt wrong, heavy, sticky. I didn't recognize the smell, but it was faintly sweet, like burnt sugar. I ignored it and told myself I was imagining things. The woman handed me a bell, small, brass, with a handle worn smooth. "Do not lose it," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "He'll hear you." I frowned. "Who?" She didn't answer. She just turned and left, closing the door behind her. I spent the first night wandering the mansion, practicing smiles, adjusting the beard. The family, she had told me over the phone, would arrive tomorrow evening with their children. I was alone. The place was quiet, but I kept hearing sounds. Faint steps above me, soft creaks of floorboards in wings of the house I hadn't explored. I chalked it up to the old building settling. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the bell, not the one in my hand, a slow, deliberate toll like someone was walking upstairs, ringing it with each step. My stomach dropped. I froze. The sound stopped suddenly. Then I heard it again, closer, coming from the hallway outside my door. I grabbed the bell from the table. The sound was heavier, louder, vibrating in my chest. It was impossible. I was alone. I don't remember when I fell asleep, only that I woke with the suit cold and damp, as if I'd been lying outside in snow and the bell gone from the table. I checked the room, no sign of anyone. The next day, the family arrived. A couple in their 30s, 2 kids, and a grandmother who barely spoke. They were polite, almost too polite. The kids, a boy and a girl, didn't smile much. When I introduced myself as Santa, they just stared. Their eyes were too large, too dark, too knowing. I smiled, waved, shook my head, tried to make small talk. They answered only when spoken to, quietly. When it was time for pictures, the boy climbed onto my lap first. He smelled like cinnamon and cold, his hair sticking to his forehead. "Why do you wear that?" he asked. I laughed nervously. "Because I'm Santa." He tilted his head. "You're not him." I froze. That was the last thing anyone should say to a man in a Santa suit. "Of course I am," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You're wearing his clothes," the boy said, "but you're not him." His sister climbed onto my other knee and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then they both climbed down and ran to the grandmother, who pulled them close. The parents smiled, thanked me, and left me with a vague feeling of unease. That night, I slept fitfully. I dreamed of chimneys stacked endlessly, smoke curling from every one, fire licking the insides. I crawled through them, soot filling my lungs, hands scraping against warm brick. There was laughter, low and rough, echoing from below. I woke up choking, sweat freezing on my skin. The bell was on the floor beside my bed. I hadn't brought it there. I picked it up. It was warm, heavier than I remembered. Over the next few nights, things got worse. The children whispered to me, asking questions they shouldn't have known. "Did you burn the bad man?" the boy asked. "Did you put him in the fire?" I froze. I had no idea what he meant. The house groaned at night. I heard footsteps in rooms I hadn't entered. I saw shadows moving where there should have been none. Once I looked in the mirror and saw my reflection smiling when I wasn't. On Christmas Eve, I was supposed to go into the living room and play Santa as usual. The family was ready, cameras set up. The boy approached me first, climbed onto my lap, and whispered, "He's coming. He's angry." "Who?" I asked. "The real Santa," the boy said. "He doesn't like imposters." The lights flickered. I shivered. The air grew thick, cold. I felt pressure behind my eyes. Then I heard a sound, heavy boots on the floor, a slow, deliberate ringing of a bell. I turned. There he was. The Santa I'd grown up believing in. Taller than any man I'd ever seen. Broad shoulders, a dark red coat caked in soot, boots cracking and worn. His beard hung in thick ropes, blackened at the tips. His eyes were pale, almost white. He didn't smile. "You've worn my skin," he said, voice like sleigh bells dropping into a pit. "You've taken my place." I'm just filling in," I stammered. "They never let you choose," he said. "They never do." The children ran behind me, eyes wide but silent. Their parents cowered behind the couch, trembling. I felt the suit tighten, as if it had a life of its own. My hands moved to the bell in my pocket. I rang it. 1 toll, 2 tolls. The sound was deafening, vibrating in my chest, bending the air. He didn't flinch. He reached out a massive gloved hand. The air seemed to compress. I felt my body lifting, moving against my will. Chimneys, rooftops, snow, smoke, they all swirled around me in an impossible whirlwind. My vision fractured. I saw things I couldn't unsee. Punishments delivered to children who had done nothing wrong. Fires lit in homes whose owners never expected them. Rewards, yes, but terrible, twisted rewards. "You wear the suit now," he said. "You know what must be done." I screamed, but the sound came out as laughter. My body moved on its own. I was him now, and he was everywhere and nowhere. I woke hours later in the snow outside the mansion, the sun rising. The suit lay beside me, torn and damp. My hands were raw, my body exhausted. Inside, the bell was cold and silent. The police were there. They said the mansion had burned during the night. 3 bodies found in the living room. The children survived, but their parents and the grandmother didn't. No explanation, no suspects. I tried to leave, to vanish, but the bell appeared wherever I went, the weight of the suit pressing into my shoulders, whispering, reminding me. I've moved several times since then, never staying in one place for long. Every Christmas Eve, I hear the bell, heavy and deliberate. I wake in the night, sometimes in the suit, sometimes not, and I know that he's waiting, watching, knowing that I've taken the place he carved out centuries ago, and I know in my bones that one day I'll hear the toll and I won't be able to resist. Because Santa Claus is real, and once he chooses you, you never truly leave. Story the end.